Hello, friends. A warm welcome to Next Page Wisdom. Today we are going to talk about a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Goodson. Have you ever wondered why you work so hard, yet at the end of the month your hands remain empty? Why the rich keep getting richer while the poor keep getting poorer? I guarantee you, after listening to this audiobook, you will see the world, money, and your own financial situation from a completely new perspective. Your life will not remain the same. This is a bold claim, but it is the truth that has been hidden from you for decades. If you are constantly struggling with rising inflation, never-ending debt, and the feeling that some invisible power is controlling your life, then you are not alone. This audiobook directly strikes at the root of these problems. It will show you that this system was deliberately designed so that ordinary people like you and me keep running endlessly, like a mouse running in a wheel, moving but reaching nowhere. After listening to this audiobook, the transformation you will feel will not just be financial, but also mental. You will begin to understand the illusion in which all of us are trapped. You will find the keys to free yourself from the chains of financial slavery. You will understand the real game of money and how a few people create money out of nothing to rule the entire world. This knowledge will give you the confidence to make better decisions for your future. This audiobook is especially for those who no longer want to live in darkness, for those who have the courage to ask why, who want to use their full potential, and who want to be free from this economic slavery. I won't tell you everything now, because some secrets should be revealed slowly. But one thing is certain. By the end of this journey, you will be a changed person. So get ready, because we're about to turn the pages of history that have been deliberately covered in dust. But a warning. If you are happy with the false comforts of your current world and are not ready to face the harsh truth, then stop this audiobook here, because once you know, you will never again enjoy the comfort of ignorance. Chapter 1, The Secret of Money, Buried in the Pages of History, How the Game that started with gold and silver turned into the slavery of paper notes. Friends, the story of money is as old as human civilization itself. But have you ever wondered what really is money? Today, the piece of paper in our pockets, for which we work day and night. What is its true value? In this chapter, we will go back to the very roots of where this game began. Let's travel far back in time, to an age when there were no banks and no paper notes. Back then, trade happened through the barter system. For example, you have wheat, I have a cow. We exchange based on our needs. But this system had many problems, determining the value of things, carrying them from one place to another. Everything was complicated. To make trade easier, humans invented money. In the beginning, money was gold, silver, and copper. Why? Because these metals were rare, durable, and everyone understood their value. This was real money backed by real worth. If you had a gold coin, you truly owned something valuable. In this era, society was relatively stable. Governments couldn't just create coins whenever they wanted, because gold and silver were limited in supply. Inflation was controlled. People could save the fruits of their labor in the form of gold and silver and trust that its value would remain the same tomorrow. It was an age of honesty. But friends, wherever there is money, greed finds its way. Some clever people found a loophole in this system. They were the goldsmiths. People used to deposit their gold with these goldsmiths for safekeeping, and in return, they received a receipt. Gradually, instead of withdrawing their gold, people began to trade directly with those receipts, because it was easier. That receipt of paper started functioning like gold itself. This is where the game began that has engulfed the whole world today. The goldsmiths noticed something cunning. Not everyone came at once to reclaim their gold. At most, only about 10% of people did so at a time. So, what did they do? They began printing receipts worth 10 times more than the actual gold they held, and they started lending those receipts to people as loans, while charging interest on them. Think about it. They were creating money out of thin air. They didn't even have real gold, just pieces of paper they called money, lending it at interest as though it was real silver and gold. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking. This was the first time in human history that debt was created as money, and this disease slowly spread across society. One of the clearest examples comes from the Roman Empire. In its early days, Rome was wealthy because real money, gold and silver coins, was in use. Governments were honest, but then a class of moneylenders emerged who began giving loans at high interest. Gradually, lands and properties slipped from the hands of farmers into those of the moneylenders. The gap between rich and poor widened enormously. A handful of people held all the wealth, while the majority drowned in debt. The result? Rome rotted from the inside. Its economic power collapsed, and in the end, the empire fell. Some rulers, like Julius Caesar, tried to change the system, giving the government back the right to issue money and curbing the moneylenders. But history bears witness. Whenever someone challenged this banking system, their end was never good. This story has repeated itself throughout history. Whenever societies used honest money, currencies backed by gold and silver, they prospered. But whenever debt-based paper money controlled by moneylenders took over, societies collapsed. This is not coincidence, friends. It is a deliberate pattern. This chapter teaches us that the money we treat as everything today is actually a deception. It is based on debt. Every single note that comes into existence does so as someone's loan. It is a trap from which escape is almost impossible once caught. But this was only the beginning. Those goldsmiths were small players. The real game began when these moneylenders came together to create an institution that enslaved not just individuals, but entire governments. That institution was the world's first central bank, how the Bank of England was founded, and how it brought an entire empire to its knees. That story will blow your mind, and we will discover it in the next chapter. The real film was just about to begin. This is the story of 17th century England. At that time, England was entangled in continuous wars, and King William III's treasury was nearly empty. He desperately needed money to fund his army and wars. That was when a group of wealthy moneylenders and merchants, led by a man named William Paterson, came to the king with a proposal. On the surface, it sounded very attractive, but hidden behind it was a very dangerous conspiracy. They told the king, "We will lend you £1.2 million in gold at 8% interest. In return, you just have to grant us a charter, a license, to establish a bank called the Bank of England." The king needed money so badly that without grasping the deeper implications, he accepted the offer. The year was 1694, and in that year, the Bank of England was born. Now you may be wondering, what's wrong with that? It was just a bank. No, my friend, this was no ordinary bank. This was a private bank owned by those same moneylenders, but it was given the name Bank of England so that ordinary people would assume it belonged to the government. This bank was given a power that no private institution in history had ever been granted before, the right to issue money for the English government. Think about the gravity of this. The nation's currency was no longer under the control of its government, but under the control of a handful of private individuals. They could print as much money as they wanted, lend it to the government, and charge interest on it. It was an unbelievably profitable deal. Imagine the government needed £1 million. The Bank of England would simply print £1 million worth of notes, just using paper and ink, costing barely a few £100s. Then it would hand these notes to the government in exchange for government bonds, on which the bank earned annual interest. In other words, the bank was creating money almost for free, and then earning real wealth, the tax money of the people, as interest on that fake money. This was legalized looting, happening in plain sight of the entire nation. The national debt, which had previously been virtually nothing, now began to soar. Because whenever the government raised taxes to repay old debts, it needed even more money, and so it borrowed again from the Bank of England. This became a never-ending cycle. The deeper the country sank into debt, the richer and more powerful the owners of the bank became. The impact of this system wasn't only on the government, but also on ordinary citizens. When large amounts of new money entered the market, the prices of goods rose, what we now call inflation. The value of the common man's hard-earned money kept declining. His savings became worthless. He worked harder but became poorer. Meanwhile, those inside the banking system grew wealthier and wealthier. They used their power to seize control of massive industries. They began funding wars, because wars were the most profitable business of all. They lent money to both sides of a conflict, and no matter the outcome, the bankers always won, because both the victors and the defeated ended up drowning in debt. Some people understood this game. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, it is the bankers who control the nation, not the government." Napoleon created a state bank in France that worked in the interest of the nation, not private owners. This was why the bankers of England hated him so much. The Battle of Waterloo was not just a war between England and France. It was a clash between two different economic systems. On one side, a debt-based system controlled by a private central bank. On the other, a nation's own independent monetary system. And we all know who won that battle. After their victory, the owners of the Bank of England spread this model across the world. They established similar private central banks in one country after another. This story teaches us a very important lesson. When the power to create money slips from the hands of the people or their elected government into the hands of private individuals, the nation loses its freedom. It may appear politically independent, but economically it becomes the slave of those bankers. The Bank of England was not just a bank. It was a weapon that caused more devastation than wars, that brought empires to their knees, and that pushed ordinary people into a swamp of debt from which escape seemed impossible. But did every nation accept this slavery so easily? Did anyone dare to resist? There was one new country born with dreams of freedom, America, and it had the courage to challenge these bankers. What happened in America became one of the bloodiest chapters in history, a chapter deliberately kept hidden from us. What happened when America tried to print its own money? Why were several American presidents mysteriously assassinated? This struggle is the story we will explore in the next chapter. Chapter 3, The Fight for Freedom You Never Knew America, and the bloody battle against the central bankers. Friends, we've all heard the story of the American Revolution. We've been told it was a fight against taxation without representation, no taxation without representation. But was that the whole truth? Could a nation really wage such a massive struggle over a handful of taxes? Author Stephen Goodson tells us that the real reason was something else entirely, a reason erased from the history books. The true struggle was over control of money. Before breaking free from England's rule, the American colonies had developed a brilliant economic system. Their governments issued their own money called colonial script. This money was debt-free. The government issued it for the benefit of the people, for building roads, schools, and hospitals. And because it was interest-free, there was no inflation, no national debt, and the people were prosperous and happy. When Benjamin Franklin visited England, officials of the Bank of England asked him the secret of the colony's prosperity. Franklin proudly explained, "It is simple. In our colonies, we issue our own money. We issue it in proportion to the needs of trade. And because it is our own, we do not pay interest to anyone." Hearing this, the owners of the Bank of England and the British government were stunned. They realized that if this independent and honest system of money succeeded, countries around the world would adopt it, and their empire of debt and interest would collapse. So in 1764, they passed the Currency Act, which forbade the American colonies from issuing their own money and ordered them to pay all their taxes only in gold and silver, which could only be obtained by borrowing from the Bank of England. This single law destroyed America's prosperous economy overnight. Money vanished from the markets. Trade came to a halt. Unemployment spread. People drowned in debt. Benjamin Franklin later wrote that this was the real reason for the American Revolution, not the small tax on tea. The American people had realized that true slavery was economic slavery. They fought their war of independence and won. But were they truly free? After the victory, America's founding leaders had deep debates about what the nation's financial system should be. Thomas Jefferson and others supported an honest, debt-free government currency. But Alexander Hamilton, known to be close to European bankers, proposed creating a private central bank in America, modeled after the Bank of England. Despite much opposition, in 1791, the first bank of the United States was granted a 20-year charter. And history repeated itself. Just like in England, America's national debt began to soar, inflation skyrocketed, and economic power concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy bankers. When the bank's charter expired in 1811, Congress refused to renew it. The bankers threatened, if the charter was not renewed, America would face a devastating war. And exactly 1 year later, in 1812, England attacked America. That war, too, was fought over control of money. As a result, America again sank into heavy debt, and in defeat was forced to grant a charter in 1816 to the Second Bank of the United States. Slavery had returned, but America produced a leader who dared to directly challenge the bankers, Andrew Jackson. He became president in 1828 with a single campaign promise: to destroy this private central bank. His slogan was, "Jackson and no bank." He called the bank a monster that was eating the nation from within. The bankers tried everything: bribes, threats, even deliberately creating economic depressions to turn people against him. But Jackson stood firm. In 1836, he finally ended the bank's charter, and for the first and last time in American history, the entire national debt was paid off. It was a remarkable victory, but the peace would not last. The bankers waited for their revenge. Their chance came during the American Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln needed money to fund the war. When he approached New York bankers, they demanded an outrageous interest rate of 24% to 36%. Lincoln refused this daylight robbery. Instead, he used his constitutional power to issue a new debt-free government currency called greenbacks. This money not only helped win the war, but also brought unprecedented prosperity. Lincoln had proven that a nation did not need the debt of private bankers. It could create its own money and thrive. But as I said earlier, those who challenge this system never meet a good end. In 1865, shortly after winning the war, Lincoln was assassinated. Many historians believe his assassination was orchestrated by international bankers who feared his idea of debt-free money. After Lincoln, greenbacks were gradually removed from circulation, and America was once again forced to borrow from bankers with gold-based debt. But the struggle was not yet over. The bankers' final and most massive assault was still to come, an assault that would enslave not only America, but the entire world forever. That assault was the creation of the Federal Reserve System. How did this happen? Who came together to hatch this conspiracy? And how did it give birth to 2 world wars in the 20th century and countless crises? This story is so shocking that you may not believe your own ears. We will now learn about this in the next chapter, Chapter 4, The Game Behind the Curtain That Changed the World, the Federal Reserve, World Wars, and the Reign of the Dollar. Friends, in the last chapter, we learned about America's unfinished fight against private bankers. Presidents like Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln did their best to destroy this monster. But after their deaths, the bankers returned more powerful than ever. At the beginning of the 20th century, they played their biggest move yet. A move that forever changed the fate of America and the entire world. This is the story of 1910. Near Georgia lies a remote island called Jekyll Island. One night, America's most powerful men, representatives of families like J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Warburg, along with key politicians, secretly gathered there. The meeting was so secret that none of them even used their real names. For 10 days, cut off from the world, they drafted a bill that would establish a new central bank in America. They knew that the American people hated the very idea of a central bank, so they cleverly named it the Federal Reserve System. The word federal was included to make people believe it was a government institution. The word system was added so that it wouldn't sound like a single bank. But in reality, it was a complete deception. The Federal Reserve is neither federal, government-owned, nor does it hold any reserves. It is a cartel of private banks, a union owned by some of the richest banking families in the world. To push this bill through Congress, they used every trick. They even deliberately created the financial crisis of 1907 so that people would demand a central bank to prevent such crises in the future. Finally, on December 23rd, 1913, when most congressmen had already gone home for Christmas, the bill was rushed through. President Woodrow Wilson, whose election had been backed by these very bankers, signed it into law. Later, Wilson wrote in his memoirs, "I have unwittingly ruined my country." With the establishment of the Federal Reserve, the American government permanently lost its constitutional right to issue money. Now, the entire U.S. money supply was under the control of a handful of private individuals. And how did they use this power? Exactly as the Bank of England had done. They began lending money to the U.S. government and charging interest on it. But this time, the game was on a much larger scale. Just months later, in 1914, World War I broke out. Was this just a coincidence? The author argues, absolutely not. The Federal Reserve had been created precisely to finance the coming World War. That war multiplied America's national debt thousands of times over. The nation drowned in debt, and the owners of the Federal Reserve became unimaginably wealthy. After the war, during the 1920s, they flooded the markets with money, creating an artificial boom known as the Roaring Twenties. People recklessly invested in the stock market. Then, in 1929, they suddenly pulled money out of circulation. The result? The stock market crashed, and America's greatest depression, the Great Depression, began. Millions lost their jobs. Thousands of banks collapsed. But in the middle of this devastation, the owners of the Federal Reserve and their fellow international bankers were buying up failing banks and companies for pennies on the dollar. They consolidated even more wealth and power. They used the crisis to push President Roosevelt in 1933 to order American citizens to turn in all their gold to the government at a fixed price. Last real connection between the US dollar and gold, at least for ordinary citizens, was broken. Now people were left only with paper notes, entirely controlled by the Federal Reserve. Then came World War II, which made the system even stronger. At the end of the war in 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement declared the US dollar the world's reserve currency. This meant that all countries would now trade in dollars and hold dollars in their foreign reserves. The reason given was that the US dollar was tied to gold, and any country could exchange its dollars for gold from America. But this, too, was a deception. America had printed far more dollars than the gold it actually held. When countries like France began demanding their gold back, in 1971, President Nixon permanently severed the link between the dollar and gold dot. From that day onward, the US dollar and all other world currencies became nothing more than pieces of paper with no real value behind them. These are called fiat currencies. Their value exists only because governments declare that they have value. Now, the Federal Reserve can print as much money as it wants without any restriction. This unlimited power to create money turned America into a superpower. It can buy goods from all over the world and pay only with paper notes that it prints itself. This is the greatest deception in the history of the world. We are all living in a system where money is debt, and debt is money. But how is this system affecting our lives today? What are those invisible chains that bind us? Are income tax, inflation, and national debt all part of this vast conspiracy? The answers to these questions will shake the ground beneath your feet. We will learn about this in our next and most important chapter. Chapter 5. Are you truly free, or just a debt slave? The invisible chains of modern slavery. Friends, until now we have turned the pages of history to understand how we reached this current economic state. We traveled from ancient Rome to the Bank of England, and finally to the Federal Reserve. But now the question is, what does all this have to do with our daily lives? Why should we understand this history? The answer is that this history is not dead. It is still alive today and controls our lives every moment. We are all trapped in a vast invisible cage, and in this chapter, we will try to identify the bars of that cage. The first and strongest chain of modern slavery is inflation. You must have often heard elders say, in our time, 1 rupee could buy so much, but today even 100 rupees buys almost nothing. Why is this so? Have goods become expensive? No. The truth is that the value of your money has gone down. When central banks, like the Reserve Bank of India in our country or the Federal Reserve in the US, print huge amounts of new money and put it into the system, the value of every rupee already in circulation decreases. This is a hidden tax we all pay. The government and banks print money to meet their needs, but the price is paid by ordinary people who lose the value of their savings. You spend your entire life working hard to save money for your old age, but by the time you grow old, inflation has cut the value of your savings in half, or even more. This is a slow theft happening to us constantly without us even realizing it. We work harder, we earn more, but still remain stuck in the same place. This is the rat race I mentioned in the beginning. The second chain of modern slavery is income tax. Do you know that in the US and many other countries, income tax was introduced at the same time as the Federal Reserve was established? This is no coincidence. When the central bank lends money to the government, it also charges interest. And where will the government get the money to pay that interest? From you and me, by collecting income tax. So our hard-earned money flows directly into the pockets of private bankers as interest on money they created out of thin air. We are told that taxes are necessary for the development of the nation, but the hidden truth is that a very large portion of our taxes goes just to pay interest on national debt, a debt that can never be repaid, because the very money needed to pay it is itself created as debt. This is a vicious cycle deliberately designed. The third and most dangerous chain is debt itself. Today's entire society runs on debt. From childhood, we are taught that as we grow up, we must buy a house, buy a car. But how? By taking loans, credit cards, personal loans, home loans, car loans. Almost everything comes with debt. From birth, we enter a system that forces us to spend our whole lives working like slaves to pay it off. We do not work at jobs because we love them, but because we must make the monthly installment payments. Our fear and insecurity are the fuel of this entire system. We are turned into consumers. TV, newspapers, and the internet constantly push us to buy more. We are pressured into buying things we don't even need, with money we don't even have, to impress people we don't even like. We sell our freedom, our time, and our lives just to repay these debts. And above all, of this stands national debt. Every country, whether America or India, is drowning in trillions of dollars of debt. But have you ever wondered, to whom is the entire world indebted? The answer? To the same handful of international bankers and institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, which control the central banking system. They use this national debt to control the policies of entire countries. When a nation is buried in debt, these institutions give it more loans, but only on their terms. They force that country to change its policies, sell off its natural resources, and hand over its economic freedom. What we call democracy often turns out to be just a facade. The real decisions are taken behind closed doors by people we never even elected. So, are we truly free? Or are we just cogs in a system designed to keep us debt slaves from birth to death? This is a harsh question, but a necessary one. Recognizing this invisible slavery is the very first step towards freedom. But is there a way out? Can we break these chains? Is there a way to understand this game and protect ourselves and our families from this economic destruction? The author believes yes, there is a way. History shows many examples where nations and people successfully challenged this system. What is that way? And what can we do on a personal level? The answers to all these questions and the final essence of this entire discussion we will learn in the last chapter, chapter 6. The path to breaking the chains of slavery, conclusion, and the road ahead. Friends, we have traveled a long and perhaps shocking journey. We have uncovered the hidden history of money that was deliberately kept from us. We have seen how a few cunning men turned debt into money and enslaved the entire world. We have followed the story from the Bank of England to the Federal Reserve and understood how wars, inflation, income tax, and debt are all weapons of one giant conspiracy. We have also realized that the freedom we celebrate may be incomplete because all of us are economically enslaved by an invisible system. It is natural to feel disappointed or angry after hearing this, but the purpose of this audiobook is not to scare or discourage you. It is to awaken you, because the solution to any problem begins only when we first accept and understand the problem. So now the biggest question is, what can we do? Are we ordinary people helpless against this vast and powerful system? Author Stephen Goodson and many other researchers believe that we are not helpless. There is a way to break these chains of slavery, and it begins with knowledge. The first and most important step is to educate yourself. Learn more about this subject, watch videos, and try to uncover the truth. Talk to your friends and family about it. When more and more people begin to understand this game, it will become difficult for those who run the system to continue their deception. They thrive only in our ignorance. Knowledge is the first torch that can drive away this darkness. The second step is to distance yourself from this debt-based system as much as possible. Free yourself from the trap of debt. Stop using credit cards and learn to live within your means. Practice the art of being content with less. Escape from the illusion of consumerism that constantly pushes you to spend more and more. When you are debt-free, you also feel mentally free. You become independent to choose the work or job you truly love, not one you must do only to pay off installments. The control of your life begins to return to your own hands. The third and very important step is to protect your savings. As we have seen, paper money, fiat currency, loses its value over time. It slowly eats away at your wealth. That is why you should invest your hard-earned money in real assets. Gold and silver have been the truest and most honest form of money for thousands of years. No matter how many notes central banks print, they cannot create gold and silver. That is why these metals protect your wealth from inflation in the long term. In addition, you can invest in land or anything that has intrinsic value and cannot be easily created or printed. This can become your shield of financial security. On the national level, the solutions suggested in this book are revolutionary. The author believes that every country should nationalize its central bank, removing it from private control and making it accountable to the people. The right to create money should return to the government, and the government should issue debt-free, interest-free money, just as Abraham Lincoln did with the greenbacks. When money is created without debt, the problem of national debt automatically disappears. There would be no need for income tax, and inflation could be controlled. It would be a system working for the people, not for a handful of bankers. Of course, this is a huge and difficult change. To achieve it, strong political will and mass awareness are required. In the end, friends, remember, this is not a fight of weapons, but of ideas. It is a fight between truth and lies. It is a fight between freedom and slavery. The essence of this audiobook is that money is the most powerful weapon in the world. And as long as it remains in the wrong hands, true peace and prosperity will never come to the world. But there is still hope. Every person who understands this truth becomes a soldier in the fight for freedom. Use your knowledge. Manage your money wisely. Spread this message to others. We may not live to see the entire system transformed in our lifetime, but we can surely lay the foundation for a better and freer world for future generations. So, friends, this was the eye-opening book, A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Goodson, summarized in detail. I hope this audiobook has made you think and has helped you see the world of money from a new perspective. Thank you so much for joining me on this enlightening journey. If you enjoyed this audiobook and learned something new, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and share it with your friends and family. Knowledge grows by sharing. And if you want to continue listening to such enlightening and life-changing audiobook summaries in the future, don't forget to subscribe to our channel Next Page Wisdom and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you once again for your time. See you in the next audiobook.